Alright, we are now watching another History Matters video. I almost blanked on the on the name of the channel. Why didn't Saddam Hussein back down before the Gulf War? Animated history documentary. Got a 4-minute 40. Let's see. So this is before the Gulf War, so we're in the 90s. All right. So this would be before his capture in the Iraq War, America's invasion in the early 2000s. So I don't know too much about this one. My guess is, well, so my guess here is that the Iraq military was actually a pretty good military in 1990. It was what, number 5 in terms of numbers. It was like 5th place or something in like biggest militaries in the world or something. I can't quite remember. And it wasn't like a bad military. It wasn't. And I think another part of it is I think there was the last time the United States had a truly extended conflict across the world would have been Vietnam. My guess is he believed that he could essentially have put the US through their own Vietnam. That's my guess. I don't know. Maybe he was hoping that it would have been the war just would not have been popular in the United States, and that the United States wouldn't be able to win fast enough before public opinion turned against the government and forced the government to back out, like in Vietnam. These are my guesses, using the content and giving Saddam Hussein some benefit of the doubt in terms of his political maneuver, in terms of his brain. I don't think he was stupid. Like, he gained power over a whole country. You can't be like you can make stupid decisions, but like to gain power and hold on to it for as long as he did, I feel like you gotta have some smarts, right? Because of my morals and ethics, the way in which he gains power and holds on to it, of course, does not match what I believe in, and therefore I do think his ideas are stupid. But like, he still held on to power. I'm not probably explaining myself well. Let's dive into and hear what the perhaps answer is. Well,
in late 1990, Iraq invaded and annexed neighbouring Kuwait. This was met with international condemnation, with even the USA and USSR agreeing that Iraq needed to withdraw or face consequences. Over the next 5 months, Iraq faced diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, and a major military build-up on its border by an international coalition. And during this period, at no point did Iraq or its leaders make any attempt to back down or defuse the situation. Which raises the obvious question, why not? Why didn't Iraq back down in the face of all of this? So in mid-1990, Iraq-Kuwait relations were terrible. Due to its previous war with Iran, Iraq was heavily in debt, much of which was owed to Kuwait. And to complicate things, the price of oil was very low at this time, which was bad for the Iraqi economy. And furthermore, the Iraqi government accused the Kuwaitis of stealing oil from right underneath it. As such, Saddam Hussein, Iraq's leader, gave the order on August 2nd to invade, and Kuwait was conquered in no time at all. Obviously, the international community condemned this. However, Saddam wasn't worried because he knew that it would be the United States leading the charge, meaning that the USSR could be relied upon to veto and block any action. But
okay, that was also going to be one of my guesses. I was just like, but the USSR is on its like back foot here in the 1990s. I don't think they'd really be able to do much.
Fun fact. No. You see, the Soviet Union was currently in the midst of falling apart, and Mikhail Gorbachev, its leader, wanted to keep relations good with the West, in case he needed help with anything like, say, any attempted coups or whatnot. With the Soviets refusing to help, there was always China. But China was still internationally isolated due to its Tiananmen Square crackdown. Thus, aiding a country that it had little connection to when doing nothing could improve relations with everyone else was a no-brainer. Never mind though, Saddam was still confident of overwhelming victory because of Iraq's recent war with Iran. For those of you that don't know, this war was a long and bloody stalemate. But given that Iraq was only a third of the size of its neighbour, Saddam saw this as a great victory. As such, he had a large army of veterans who would inevitably destroy the invaders. Furthermore, the Iran-Iraq war had done wonders for Iraq's image amongst its fellow Arab and Sunni nations. Saddam was able to position himself as the first and last line of defence against Shia Iran, and many of his neighbours agreed. In fact, this was one of the reasons that Saddam thought he could conquer Kuwait and get away with it. His reasoning being that the rest of the Arab world was so indebted to him that they'd be happy to not only allow Iraq one tiny annexation, but they'd also go to bat for him internationally. Instead, what happened was that Saudi Arabia figured out that they'd likely be next, and so gave refuge to the Kuwaiti government and also tried to push for direct intervention. Okay, so the
So, it is kind of what I was somewhat leaning into when I was talking about Saddam Hussein. Saddam's logic isn't that flawed. His logic isn't flawed here. He's pretty much like had he done this at a different at a different point in time, maybe this would have gone the way he was he had expected it to. But because he chose 1990, nope.
USSR, China, and the Arab world hadn't come through for Saddam, but his next plan was simple: wait. He and his government thought that the longer his occupation of Kuwait went on, the less interested the rest of the world would be, and eventually...
And that kind of has happened historically. That is what happens, right? Like, honestly, that's what happened with Crimea. That's what happened with Crimea in 2014. Russia took Crimea, the Crimean Peninsula, up until Russia invaded Ukraine. Fucking people pretty much, the wider world, pretty much just kind of fucking stopped caring. Right? Obviously, people that pay attention to global politics and stuff like that were aware, and I would say most were probably like, hey, that should go back to Ukraine. But, right, the wider world, not care that much. The moment Russia invaded, though, it started getting talked about again.
They'd all move on. The only moving that actually happened, though, was the movement of coalition troops to Saudi Arabia in preparation for an invasion. As such, it was time for Plan E, win friends so that the pressure would die down, and Saddam had a brilliant idea on how to achieve this. Take hostages. Baghdad...
Okay, alright, there goes. Alright, there's his stupid ideas.
Had quickly banned foreigners from leaving Iraq, and had hoped that their governments wouldn't want to risk intervention in case something were to happen to them. It will shock you to learn that this didn't endear Saddam to anyone, and so the intervention was now inevitable. With this in mind, surely it was time for Saddam to back down. O ye of little faith, Saddam had many more foolproof plans for victory. The next one was simple: just win the war. Not by destroying the invading armies and conquering Saudi Arabia, even he knew that wasn't possible. But instead, his plan was to inflict such heavy casualties on the coalition.
Oh my god, I'm largely spot on my guesses. At the beginning.
Coalition that continuation was impossible. During Iraq's previous war with Iran, casualties on both sides numbered in the hundreds of thousands, and Saddam figured that Iraq, or more accurately he, could handle such casualties, whereas the coalition states would have to withdraw if that became clear. Saddam assumed that this would lead to a negotiated peace where he would graciously allow the return of South Kuwait, the bit without oil. The coalition began its bombardment in January 1991, and whilst things looked bad...
Wait, hold on, there was definitely words on that bomb.
Without oil. The coalition began its bombardment in January 1991, and while
there is something. Purdy the DOD.
And whilst things looked bad, Saddam had yet another way to end the war on his terms: by bombing Israel.
Wait, hold on. This was pre-Oslo Accords.
The intent was to goad Israel into retaliating, which would allow him to frame the war as a religious one. This would inevitably lead to these nations also getting involved and fracturing the coalition's forces. The flaw with this plan was that the Israeli government saw through this and didn't respond, and so it was time for Desert Storm. 4 days later, Iraq had been expelled from Kuwait, and the coalition was moving up through the south of Iraq.
Fucking gun jam.
Proper. The Iraqi army was essentially ruined, and so the coalition stopped its advance and declared a ceasefire. At this point, Saddam was forced to negotiate, and he agreed to respect Kuwaiti independence and pay for any damages caused. Saddam was allowed to stay in charge, but this was on the condition that he give up his chemical weapons. And I may be wrong about this, but I think this comes up again in the future.
Whoa, foreshadowing. And that was, why didn't Saddam Hussein back down before the Gulf War? This was a great episode by fucking History Matters. Oh my god. Obviously, I don't think it's their best one, but I think they did a great job at getting all that information across in 4 minutes. It still amazes me how much just contextual information they can squeeze in so quickly and so effectively. I love it. I Love it. Yeah. Next reaction.